Hi there, I'm Leisha Gerbinski. This is Saskatchewan. This is a look into the life, disappearance, and murder of Saskatoon's Megan Gallagher. Megan was a daughter, a parent, and friend who loved animals. But then she went missing without a trace in September 2020. Her body wasn't found for 2 years. Her family searched and never gave up hope until her death was ruled a homicide. And that is when everything changed. Candice Lipsky, hello again.
Hey there.
So this story continued to grip the province from the moment she went missing to now when we're just starting to learn the very grisly details of her death.
Yeah, it's when you step into the courtroom and start reading the very detailed court documents that you learn the horrors of what happened to Megan. But it reveals something else too, Leisha.
And what's that?
A system that is meant to bring justice to victims and to the surviving family members of those victims does not always necessarily do that.
So what you're saying is that the court proceedings didn't go as many had expected them to.
That's exactly it, Leisha. 9 people are charged in connection with her death, and one by one, pleas are entered that get those charged lower sentences. And in what some see as a very short period of time, many of the accused were or will be released from jail. Pleas mean no trials, which means no public accounting of what happened to Megan. And on top of all of that, publication bans prevent the Gallaghers from talking about what they see and hear in court. I've been working very closely with my colleague Dan Zakreski. He has covered court for years, so he really understands the system and has a wealth of institutional knowledge. And even for him, Leisha, this case is pretty shocking.
9 people charged, guilty pleas, multiple publication bans. I think this is what people are really trying to wrap their heads around when it comes to Megan's story. Here's part 4.
We're just in the alley by Court of King's Bench, which is conveniently enough about a block away from CBC. And this is one of the 2 courthouses in the city where the legal side of Megan's case unfolded. Starts in provincial court. If someone's accused of a crime, that's where they first appear. And then when they go to trial, it's either at provincial court or here at King's Bench. Over the past 5 years, there were 9 people charged, and it was really a roster of individuals. We had 4 people who were charged with the unlawful confinement, assault, and disposing of her body. There was Jessica Badger, John Sanderson, Ernest Whitehead, and Robin John. Of those 4, the charges were stayed against Robin John, but the other 3 were sentenced after they pled out to their offenses in court. And then we had 5 people who were charged in connection with her actual death. There was Robert Thomas. He was charged with first-degree murder, pled out to second-degree murder. There was Thomas Sutherland, who was charged with manslaughter. That charge was stayed. We had Roderick Sutherland, who was charged with manslaughter. And then we had Cheyenne Petitous and Summer Sky Henry. They were the 2 women who were charged with first-degree murder, actually went to trial, and then days into the trial, everything kind of went sideways, and they ended up pleading out to manslaughter. And that is the one I think that probably rankled Deb and Brian the most, because the trial had actually started, and then they had gone in camera, which means they kick everybody out of the courtroom, and then the Crown, the defense, and the judge sort of hash stuff out behind closed doors. And the next thing they knew was a first-degree murder trial had ended in a manslaughter plea. We're here today to talk to a lawyer named Chris Murphy, who is Cheyenne Petitous' lawyer, and who's going to, I hope, be able to explain to us exactly what was happening behind the scenes and how we had, first-degree murder. If you're found guilty of that, that's an automatic 25-year life sentence before you can apply for parole. These 2 women pleaded out to manslaughter and were sentenced to effectively 6 years each. So it was a dramatic downgrading of consequence.
We might talk about it with Chris Murphy as well, but Dan, What would you say made this such a tricky case for the justice system?
Overall, anytime you have 9 people accused, you have to preserve the integrity of the process. These individuals, when they started off, some of them were going with jury trials, some of them were going judge alone. So if you imagine if I'm the first accused person up and we have a jury trial and there's no ban on publication, then all of the evidence comes forward, and anybody following the trial will hear a narrative with examination and cross-examination and facts coming out about what happened. Well, the next time you have a trial and you try to select a jury, one of the first questions they ask potential jurors is, have you seen anything in the media or heard anything that would make you think this person might be guilty or not guilty? And all of a sudden there's the possibility of a vast pool of potential jurors saying, oh, well, I just saw a trial where I heard that this happened to this person. So the immediate challenge was, how do you proceed through 9 cases, be fair to the victim's family who want justice, be fair to the public who want to know what's going on, but also be fair to the accused, because this, as we've seen, has spread over 5 years. And I think the general public has never really gotten, a crystal clear explanation of what happened. So that's the challenge.
We're at the courthouse today to get some of those answers from lawyer Chris Murphy. Chris shows up in court casual attire, carrying 3 coffees. He's a little bit out of breath, hair is slightly tousled. Not only did he bike here, but he's in a bit of a rush. He has things to tell us before heading off to a murder sentencing.
Chris Murphy, Candace Lipsky.
Nice
Good morning.
to meet you.
Nice to meet you as well.
Chris represented Cheyenne Peditus, who was originally charged with first-degree murder in Megan's death. Her name might be familiar to some in Saskatoon.
The families of 2 children killed by an impaired driver say they want the justice system fixed. Cheyenne Peditus was behind the wheel of a stolen truck when she hit a vehicle and killed 2 teenagers in 2014. Now, Peditus is charged with first-degree murder in the death of a Saskatoon woman. Megan Gallagher was last seen 2 years ago, and police are treating her case as a homicide. Alex Hockey is the father of one of the children who died in the 2014 crash. He says Peditus didn't serve her full sentence, but she should have.
Like, I hate to say it, but we told you so. We said this is going to happen. She's that kind of person.
Cheyenne Peditus and Summer Sky Henry stood trial in relation to Megan Gallagher's murder back in January of 2025, but they both ended up pleading guilty to manslaughter. Chris says the case had huge problems well before the trial even started. First, it took months and months for the Crown to provide a disclosure.
I requested that information back in October of 2022, and I followed up on it in October of 2023, and then in January 2024, in May of 2024, all the way through to the fall of 2024. And I wasn't getting it, right? And this was very, very important information because we had pretrial applications that were scheduled for November of 2024 that I needed this disclosure so that I could prepare for them and ultimately make submissions to the court.
When they finally provided it, the name of a confidential police informant, or CI, who had broken the case 4 years earlier was included in it. This reveal put Chris, the police, the prosecutors, and the judge in a bind.
So from my perspective, there were 2 options. Number one, that the individual that was named as a CI in the affidavit actually wasn't. And the police officer was either being grossly negligent or dishonest with the court by saying that that person was a CI. That's option one. The second option was that the person actually was a CI, and the Crown and the police disclosed to me information that made it very, very easy from my perspective to identify that person. And so I wrote the Crown immediately and I said, essentially, there is a big problem here. You guys have to remedy it, because as my job as Cheyenne Peditus's defense lawyer, I have an obligation to put forward the defenses that are available to her. One of them was the fact that these warrants were sworn. In my view, there could have been an abusive process. So I said to the Crown, essentially, you need to remedy this because I'm not going to be the person who puts this CI's name on the street, right? I'm not going to file documents that identify this person as a CI and be responsible for the fallout.
And then it got even more complicated. Chris says that police and Crown flip-flopped in their position. They couldn't agree on whether the person was a confidential informant or a witness. The trial began with one officer saying the person was a witness, another saying they were a confidential informant. This is when the judge kicked everyone out of the courtroom and went behind closed doors, known as in camera, to sort out what to do.
What's going on here? And more importantly, what steps are being taken to protect the identity of the CI and what steps are being taken to protect him on the street? What involvement, if any, did the police have with this CI before allowing his or her name to be spoken in open court? Because again, there's a very, in Saskatchewan in particular, but across Canada, there is a significant difficulty proving and making arrests in cases of missing and murdered Indigenous women, okay? And so part of the things that the police and the Crown rely upon are the participation and the assistance of the public, which include confidential informants, right? And so if the administration of justice is intent on solving the missing and murdered Indigenous women cases, they've got to make sure that they're protecting their own witnesses and the people that come forward. They have to make sure that the public knows that if I come forward and give confidential information that may help to solve one of these cases, I'm going to be protected. And that's really, from my perspective, the black eye that this case has left on the administration of justice, because it leaves open the idea that a person in the public may not be protected ultimately if he or she comes forward with information. And it's the job of the police and the Crown and the court to protect that identity of those confidential informants. It's not the job of the defense, right? In this case, Summer Sky Henry's lawyer and I, Mr. Baczynski, were taking active steps to protect the identity of the confidential informant, but it wasn't our job. We were doing it anyway because that was what, from my perspective, that was what needed to be done. But make no mistake, it wasn't our job to do that.
The trial started but quickly went behind closed doors. Eventually, the judge, prosecutors, and defense hammered out a solution. Cheyenne Pitatus and Summer Sky Henry each pleaded guilty to manslaughter and were sentenced to 7 years each. This was a far cry from a possible life sentence for first-degree murder.
So the justice system was spared an abusive process case where they would have had to answer to how did you actually get these search warrants? You know, was it a confidential informant or a witness? So the police were spared that. The Crown was also spared having to explain how the name got out in the first place. Everything, I don't want to be glib about it, but everything went away with those pleas, all of those awkward questions.
Well, many of those issues went away with the plea from Ms. Pitatus and Ms. Summer Sky Henry. And that's the nature, in many respects, of criminal law, is that at the end of the day, each side, the Crown Attorney and the accused person, make an evaluation of what the case is against the accused and vice versa, and you come to a resolution very often. That's what happened in this case. And I think that it's fair to say that but for the issue with the CI and the abusive process application, but for those issues, it likely would have been a higher sentence if these issues hadn't come into play. And I think from the perspective of the Gallagher family, that is something that would be very, very hurtful to them, knowing that potentially the sentences could have been higher had it not been for these abusive process type issues. And I know that much of the proceedings were in camera and that the the Gallagher family wasn't able to hear what happened in them. And that's a necessary aspect of the criminal justice system. But at the same time, I believe it would likely leave a lot of questions unanswered for them, which is in the circumstances of this case, extremely unfortunate. And so from my perspective, and I think that this is a very, very important question to ask the Crown Attorney's Office and the Saskatoon Police Service, and frankly, Megan Gallagher's family, is what are the policies that are currently in place to protect the identity of a confidential informant between the Crown and the police? Because in this case, I still don't know who the obligation ultimately falls upon to protect the identity, because at one point the Crown was saying that this is the police's job, and then it seemed to be as though it was the Crown's job to claim the privilege. My understanding from the law has always been it's the Crown's job to assert the privilege, not the police's. The police certainly have input, but the buck ultimately stops with the Crown.
When we reached out, the Saskatoon Police Service said it was not in a position to discuss the issues with the media. They said they are currently meeting with partners and reviewing the investigation. And Sask Justice said public prosecutions will not be making any comment on these cases while the matter is still before the court. As a lawyer for one of the accused, Chris Murphy saw the evidence close up. So what did happen to Megan? Well, Chris says it likely all started with the kidnapping and assault of Bobby Thomas, one of Megan's killers, earlier that summer in 2020. Thomas got it into his head somehow that Megan was involved in that assault. Chris says he never saw any evidence that that was true. And the exact details would have to come out during the final trial.
And we'll see where that goes. Maybe evidence will be called, and maybe the Gallagher family will be able to see once and for all what really happened inside of that garage. Because I have an idea of what happened from looking at the disclosure, but I just don't know. None of these witnesses have been tested in cross-examination. So it's difficult to say what really did happen. And I think that's probably, what's most difficult, or one of the things that is most difficult for the Gallagher family, just to have some finality to knowing what happened, because I don't think that the various agreed statements of fact that have been filed in these various cases have given those types of answers yet.
Megan's murder and the cases that came next follow a pattern Chris says he has noticed in his time as a lawyer.
I think that, in my opinion, having practiced in Saskatoon for the last 5 years on a regular basis, and having done cases in Saskatoon previously in relation to Indigenous men and women who are accused or victims of crime, I believe that the justice system in Saskatchewan needs to go further, or come along further and understand that there may be, and I'm not suggesting at all that anybody in the justice system is deliberately biased against Indigenous accused or witnesses. I'm not suggesting that at all. But the fact of the matter is that as of a couple years ago, 98% of girls in jail between the ages of 12 and 17 in Saskatchewan were Indigenous. Okay, so you can't get to a number like that without there being a systemic problem. And I think that there is still in existence in Saskatchewan a subconscious stereotyping that is going on, where a Indigenous victim is not given the same resources in an investigation or the same sort of resources in a prosecution. So I think that there's more to be done in the province of Saskatchewan, as there is in across the country in Canada.
The past 5 years have been hard on the Gallaghers. They've been piecing together what happened over time, but there's still unknowns. That is in part because of a publication ban that has prevented details about the case from being shared openly.
It's a new form of silence that is killing us. We have to remain silent. We have to keep our hearts close to our chest. So the challenges keep getting compounded. And again, a lot of it goes back to the realities of not the people in the justice system or the legal system. They have been phenomenal. But there's something in the justice system itself that is just, it's killing us.
Well, and it keeps re-victimizing the victims. You know, like it's absolutely bizarre that 5 years later we can't, talk about, and I mean, we can't talk about what happened to Megan, even though her story is sadly not the only one in Saskatchewan, not the only one in Saskatoon. When is somebody, in 5 years, somebody going to stand up and fight for Megan and what happened to her? I still am asking that same question.
That's a really important question to be asking, Candace, but there's more, isn't there? Another surprise with another of the accused?
Correct. In March of 2025, something else unexpected, the Crown filed a stay of proceedings in the trial of accused Thomas Sutherland, meaning the Crown no longer believed there was a reasonable likelihood of conviction in his case. The court document, which was signed by prosecutor Bill Burge, provided no reason for the stay. Sutherland was charged with manslaughter and unlawful confinement, but now he's a free man, and that left one more trial.
And which trial is this?
Roderick William Sutherland was the last remaining case. And because it just came to an end, we can finally talk about what really happened to Megan.
On our final episode, we hear how the 9th trial ended.
And also about other missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls in this province.
I also want to know how the Gallaghers feel now about the people who murdered their daughter.
That's in the next episode, which is available now.
Candace, thank you.
Thanks, Leisha.
This is a special series, and we encourage you to share all 5 parts with someone you know, someone who wants to know what happened to Megan Gallagher. You can also connect with us at thisissk@cbc.ca. Talk again soon.